have to manage me because I suck at watching time.
No problem.
Okay,
We
good.
can do that. We can do that. And at some point we want to stop somewhere where you think is appropriate and just have a
For
little,
a memorial?
like a quiet moment, and then
Yeah.
we have a piper who's going to play some.
Well, we actually have two places where there's actually a memorial itself. One for all those who were victims, so the 102,000 people that passed away and never came back. And we have a memorial especially for the trains and for all the 107,000 people that were deported. So we have two places where you could do your thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wherever you decide would be the best one, you just let us know.
Yeah, well, whatever you think is the most beautiful spot as well.
Okay.
So, yeah. Do you want me to start now, unless, but there's still people waiting in line, or shall I? Or we wait for 5 more minutes?
Maybe 5 more minutes.
Okay.
And if we have 5 minutes, I don't remember seeing those on those memorials over there.
Yeah. So those are the memorials. We call them the coffins.
Okay.
And they're actually for the 5 main camps where the people were deported to. So it's Theresienstadt, Mauthausen, Auschwitz, Bergen-Belsen and Sobibor. So those are the 5 main camps where they were deported to. On top you can see the amount of people that were actually taken there. And on the front you can see how many people passed and how many people came back again. So that's a small memorial that we have. Yeah, which is just outside because that's actually where the train was running as well. So maybe from the bus, from the coach, you've seen on the right side when we drove over, you can see the railway beam standing up. On each and every one of them there's a plaque with the information of the date of the train, the amount of people on the train, and to where they were taken, whether it's Auschwitz or whatever. And there are 93 of them because there's 93 trains that left from here to take 107,000 people to the camps in the east. And Auschwitz of course is the biggest, but I think Sobibor is the most unknown for most people. You ever heard of Sobibor? Yeah, okay, good. So for us it was a complete surprise that in actually this year, exactly 80 years ago, 19 trains left for Sobibor. Nobody knew. There was no information about Sobibor. And so in March 1943 the first train left, and in July 1943 the 19th train left, and in total there were 34,313 people that were taken there, and only 18 survived, of which 2 of them were the only ones that were actually inside the camp itself. The other 16, they were actually taken from the railway, from the ramp, to go immediately to other working camps, and there they survived. But there's only 2 ladies that actually survived, living in Sobibor, and then going through the uprising of Sobibor, and then actually surviving another year in Poland during the war, which is remarkable that they made it. Do we have everyone already?
There's still a few more people.
All right.
I just have to get something from the bus. I'll be back.
All right. So let me just start with the beginning. Hopefully everyone can hear me. We're actually standing in front of the house, which has been a spectator of everything that happened here starting from 1938. So a lot of people think that this campsite was built by the Nazis, by the Germans, but it wasn't. It actually is built by the Dutch government, because starting from 1933, when Hitler came to power, we actually already received many German Jews that were refugees from Germany trying to flee to the Netherlands. Now the Netherlands is of course that we were neutral in World War I, so everybody expected that if there was going to be a war again, the Dutch wouldn't fight, because we like to be friends with everyone. And the second thing is we have the port of Rotterdam, and that was actually the gateway to England, to America, or even to Palestine already. So many people tried to get to the Netherlands. Of course in 1933 when Hitler came to power, in 1935 when we had the Nuremberg racial laws, which made life very difficult already, and of course in 1938 with the Kristallnacht, so with the Crystal Night, we had so many refugees that the Dutch government said we need to build something because there's too many right now. And so they looked for a place, actually in the middle of nowhere, to build a refugee camp. And that's actually the start of this camp. And that's when that house was built as well. And ever since, there has been no change whatsoever on the house. It was sold in the 50s to a private person, and they never changed anything on the house as well. And we were able to obtain it somewhere in 2015. And then we realized it's not in such a good state anymore. So that's why we built the big glass showcase around it to preserve it. So this campsite had many phases. So it started off as a house, as a campsite for the refugees. Then of course on May 10th, 1940, the war started for us as well. In the beginning, they left this campsite alone, but when the final solution came to play, and also in the Netherlands, they actually found that this would be the exact perfect place for all the Jews to be gathered and then to be deported. So starting from 1942, it became a deportation camp. And that's when Gemmeker came to live as a camp commander in this building. And he is, of course, the man who is actually responsible for making sure that the trains would leave in time with the right amount of Jews that had to be in the trains. So in 1943, at the end of 1943, Seyss Inquart, the highest Nazi in the Netherlands, actually declared the Netherlands is Judenvrij, so there's no more Jews. Whether they would still be living in the ghetto of Amsterdam, or they would be here or in another campsite, but they declared that the rest of the Netherlands was actually Judenvrij. And then Gemmeker had a little bit of nerves because he thought, what would happen to this camp and where would I go? Now, he knew about the East. He always says he didn't, but we know he knew about the East and what happened in the East, and we also know that he absolutely did not want to go to the East as well. So actually at the end of the war, he transformed the campsite into a working camp. And so we were a big part in the recycling business of the German war. So material that broke down in the Netherlands were taken here to Westerbork. Here the people had to take them apart to make sure all the good parts were still reusable. And then they were shipped to Germany to reuse in the war effort. So Gemmeker did that because he wanted to preserve his place here. Whatever happened, he didn't want to go to the East. Then on April 11th, 1945, the Canadians were very close by, together with the Polish and the French soldiers that landed in Drenthe. And then he fled to Den Haag. There he was captured, and then he was taken back to here to be in front of a judge here in Assen. Unfortunately, he is really what we call a gentleman Nazi, and he knew exactly what kind of game he was playing, but he also knew how to erase his past. He knew to erase his links towards anything that had to do with the destruction of the Jews. And so therefore, when people had to testify against Gemmeker, they actually had to say he was taking care of us. Because in this campsite, there was no violence. SS soldiers were not allowed to go into the campsite with weapons, with dogs, with beating or whatever. They had to be polite. They had to be, because this campsite was sometimes occupied by 15,000 people, and there's only 60 SS soldiers running it. So they needed to have a structure that made sure that people stayed where they are. There was no famine here. There was always food. Maybe not always enough, but there was always food. There were nothing. So actually, when people had to testify that came back or lived here in the camp and were liberated, they actually had to say, yeah, we cannot say anything bad about Mr. Gemmeker. Okay, he held us in the campsite, yes, but yeah, he tried to take care of us. That's what they had to say. And he was able to say, I did not know what happened to my Jews. As soon as they stepped into the train, I had to let them go, and I did not know. He only received 10 years in jail, which he only had to do 6. And then he returned to Germany and lived there as an old man and died in his 70s. Even Germany tried to prosecute him for more than 30 years for his acknowledgement and his role he played in the Holocaust, and they were never able to find any trace that he knew what happened here. But let's go to the campsite itself. And if you have any questions about what you see or what you want to know about the war here or whatever, just let me know.
Gotcha.
So the campsite has been in use for not just the period of war, but actually for a longer period of time as well. So in April 1945, the camp was liberated, and then within a few days, the soldiers of the Dutch government, BS, the Binnenlandse Strijdgroepen, so the guys that tried to fight the war in the Netherlands, they actually already came with those who collaborated with the Germans. So we had a really funny situation because there was still around 800 Jews in this campsite that were left here. They slowly came to hear what happened to their family, to their friends in the east. And at the same time they were bringing in these Dutch people that were collaborators with the Germans, because they had to be internalized, they had to be, how do you call it? Yes. And well, they had to be punished as well, of course, so they had to be reprogrammed, sort of. But then, so the Jews were actually given the power as guards. So you can understand that there were some problems here and there, so they took out the Jews as quickly as they could and then just left this as a camp for the collaborators for about 3 years. Then this campsite became training station for soldiers who had to fight in the war in Indonesia. So Indonesia was a colony of us. We didn't want to let it go after the war, so we had to fight for it. So soldiers that were in the Dutch army of the Indonesian army were actually trained here in the camp, and then they were taken to Indonesia. But when they were, when Indonesia got his independent status in December 1949, they had a big problem with the soldiers from the Moluccan Islands. So the Moluccan Islands are a small island group within the Indonesian archipel, and these soldiers fought with the Dutch because they hoped to have their own republic. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, but Indonesia said, we don't want these soldiers in our country. So they had to be taken to the Netherlands. And so they lived here with their families for more than 20 years in the same barracks, in the same way. The Jews lived here for 3 years. And actually you can see in the back that they're building a theater. That's actually a part of one of the barracks that they're rebuilding from the time of the Moluccans. Because starting from next week we will have a few theater shows here that tell us about the period of 20 years of people living here in Kamp Schattenberg from the Moluccan Islands. And then in the 70s, the government decided to empty this camp. So all the Moluccan people, they were not taken back to the island, but they were actually dispersed in the Netherlands, and they had to live in separate areas in the Netherlands in the 70s. Thank you. Kind of not so nice history of the Dutch. Anyways, and then they decided to take everything away. So all you can see, all the barracks, everything has been taken away, and ever since we tried to bring back small pieces to rebuild and to retell the story that happened here. Now luckily we know a lot because of this picture we can see here. The picture is taken by Mr. Breslauer. He came into the camp in 1942 and he was given a job by Gemmeker. He had to photograph everything. And actually in 1944, when Gemmeker got a little bit tense about the idea of going to the east, he actually told Breslau, you need to make a film as well. You need to film Kamp Westerbork and show them that this is a perfect working camp with no discipline problems, with people working hard, being producive and everything. So it's really unique. We are the only campsite from all the Nazi camps during the war that actually has original pictures from 1944. All the others that you see, those are actually propaganda, like the ones from Theresienstadt. So that's all made, but Breslauer had the free hand to film everything, including trains that are arriving and trains that are leaving, which is of course unique, but we have those pictures. What you can see here is Gemmeker tried to create from this camp a small village, completely self-sustainable, and everything organized inside the camp was organized by the Jews themselves. And so inside the camp there were no SSers, no Nazis, no nothing that tried to control the Jews. They had their own small village here. And like I said, Gemmeker was a gentleman Nazi. He knew exactly what he was doing. So he also made sure that the village looked like a normal village. There were schools. There was an orphanage. In the back you can see the picture of the old lady. There was a hospital. It was actually the best hospital of the Netherlands during World War II, here in the campsite. Because Gemmeker said, you are going to the east. There you need to work. So you need to be fit. You need to be healthy. Not only fit and healthy in mind, in body, but also in mind. So he knew that when the trains would leave, people here in the campsite would be sad, would be in mourning. So he made sure that every night when a train left, there would be a cabaret night with music, with theater, with a play. Yep. So he kept these people as long as he could inside this camp. So each and every one who had a good job or was able to do something which in his eyes was good, they were actually able to stay. So the fight in this camp became, we need a job. Because people were taken from their house, but they were still in the Netherlands. They knew that. So whatever happened, they didn't want to go to the east. Now the biggest question is always, did they know? Did they know what happened to the east? Many of the German Jews kind of knew, because there were also already extermination programs happening in Germany to make the Reich pure. For instance, the euthanasia programs for disabled people. They already knew that Hitler would go really far in order to create a perfect race. So they kind of knew, but they didn't know how. And they didn't expect, like each and every person, that it would be a camp like Sobibor, where the only purpose was to exterminate people in masses. And that is why the Holocaust is unique. And yes, the Holocaust is a genocide, but a genocide is not always a Holocaust, because the Holocaust means a burning sacrifice. And it means that this is the only time in history where people on large scales were moved into extermination factories, where they were taken in with big amounts of people, they were gassed, then they were cremated, and there's nothing left. So did people know? No. They did know it's not good. Because whatever the Nazis had in their head, it's not good. But each and every person believed we have to work. And Gemmeker made that utopia come true here by creating a perfect village where everything is good. There's food, you can get fit, you can get healthy. Any kind of medical specialty that you needed, you can get it here. Kids are all going to school. Because Gemmeker said, when you go to the east, you need to go to school too. And you cannot have no school here because then you're falling behind. If you want to do gymnastics, fine. If you want to do sports, fine. There was a soccer competition, fine. Whatever made you happy to make sure that you stayed healthy and fit, it was done here. But each and every person that came in had to go through this barrack, which you can see here, because that's the registration. So each and every person that came through the doors of Kamp Westerbork, they've been written down by name, their birth date and where they came from. And we are lucky to see that the 800 that were left here at the end of 1944 and of 1945, they were left here to actually to take down the whole campsite and to remove all evidence, that with their risk of life, even though they were already in danger, they hid all those registration cards throughout the camp, including also the forbidden pictures and the forbidden episodes of the movie inside the camp. So when the Canadians came, and actually they came from that side, for you to know, they came from that side, when they liberated this, they could actually hand over the evidence of every 107,000 person that came here and that were registered here. And as you can see, there's many people, because like I said, working is staying. So even, I always tell the kids that come here, so even if you just had to sharpen the pencils, it meant you had a job. And it meant you might be able to stay. But still, people had to go. If you look in the back, you can see a lady, her name is Clara Engelsman. She was 102. This picture is taken on her birthday that she celebrated here in the hospital. She was weakened from the traveling to here to Westerbork. She was able to stay for 2 weeks in the hospital, but then she had to go. Also, she had to go to the east. But what do you think? What do you think that they said to a lady of 102 years old that cannot work, why she has to go to the east? Any idea?
Take care of babies.
Well, no, just go there. We'll take care of you. Don't worry. Like we take care of you here, we take care of you there. And so those little things gave people hope. It also includes 20,000 children, many of them just babies, like Machieltje. He was only 6 days old when he came here, and he was weakened. Gemmeker came with the incubator for children. He took it from a hospital in Groningen. He also brought the best camp surgeon, or the best children's surgeon and children doctor he could find. The doctor actually said that the little baby needed to have a little cognac, like a little bit of booze, every morning and every evening to strengthen. And it appears that Gemmeker ran back to his house, got his best brandy, cognac or whatever, took it to the doctor to give it to the baby. And for 3 months, Machieltje was the hope of the camp. And when he was 3 months and 2 weeks old, he and his mom were ready to go to the east. They will be taken care of in Auschwitz. Yeah, exactly. So the train is one of the things that actually dominated life here in the camp. And let's get towards the train as well. So when we started walking, one of you asked why? Why all this effort? Why all this organization? Why all these logistics? Why create this utopia? Now, we don't know, because most of the Nazis that actually were the architects of all this are luckily passed away, dead or whatever. But there's a few reasons that we can come up with. First of all, out of sight. For the Polish Jews and the Jews in the east of Europe, it's a whole different story. They knew as soon as they were put inside the ghettos, they would die. And if they were taken from the ghettos in the trains, they would die. They knew immediately. Because in the east, the anti-Semitism feelings are greater, are bigger, and they were more segregated as well. They were more living in their own unique communities in the east. In the west, it's a different story. Here in the west, in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in France, or even in Denmark or in Germany, the Jews were completely integrated. They were part of being Dutch. The only difference is that they don't go to a house with a cross on it, but they go to a house with a star on it. That's actually the only thing. And they're not open on Saturday, but they're open on Sunday. That's the only difference. So they are, for some of them, even more than 400 years part of our history as well. And the Nazis really tried to make the Dutch people that we are brothers and sisters of the same Aryan race. But they also knew the Dutch were always very tolerant and we accept a lot of people. And so they knew if they would be open about what they would do to the Jews, that we in the West, we would fight harder against the Germans. So you need to orchestrate something. So you need to make believe that whatever you're doing with these people, it's not so bad. It goes so far that when Jews actually returned from the campsites after the war, in the West, no one believed them. They said, you had a hard time, well, we were at war, we had a hard time as well. It's not until 1948, 49 and 1950 when the evidence came, when the stories came, when people slowly start to realize what really happened to all the Jews, that they start to believe what happened. So the first years for Jews to come back to the western part of Europe has been really hard as well. And that is why so many left for Canada, for America, for Palestine, which then turned into Israel, because they were not they didn't feel welcome in Europe, which is true, because in the 2,000 years of history that they were in Europe, they were always the minority. They were always the stranger, even though they were completely integrated. So one of the reasons why everything was built as a utopian world is to make sure that in the West, we did not fight against the Germans, that we not come into resistance more quickly, because they really hoped that we would see the Nazi way as also people from the Germanic tribes and everything. So that's one of the reasons. But they did, and they created a whole logistic system, including these trains. So what you see here are restored trains from the 1910, 1920s. So these are original. We also know that they were used in the transportation of the Jews, but we don't know for sure whether they were here in Westerbork as well. But they're identical to the ones that were used. Now, not all the Jews were actually moved inside these cargo or these cattle transports that you can see here. So if they went, for instance, to Bergen-Belsen or Theresienstadt, they were model camps. They had normal trains, normal passenger trains with seatings and a little table and everything. But if the trains left for the destruction camps like Auschwitz and, for instance, Sobibor, there were these trains. People were stuffed into it because Eichmann is the big logistic man in Berlin, and he decided how many people would fit in one wagon. And he actually decided that on 1 square meter, 4 persons would fit. Now try to stand with 4 people on 1 square meter. Just try. Go ahead, try. 1 square meter, so it's 1 by 1. Now you're standing there holding each other and hugging each other, but you still have to realize you have luggage. There are small children stuck between your feet and your legs. There are elderly that have to sit down because they cannot stand up again. At the end of the train, of the wagon, at the end, there's 1 bucket with water and there's 1 bucket to do your thing. But to get there from the other side is impossible. And the door doesn't open. And that's how you're stuck inside for 3 days and 2 nights. Sometimes the door opens just for you to refill the bucket or empty the other one. But then it's being back inside, close the door. During the night you would stand for hours in pure darkness, not knowing what would happen, because the trains didn't run during the night because they were, they could be bombed, for instance. So people who survived the train They actually say that when you get into the train, you're still full of hope because you have the illusion in your head. And then after 2 days, it slowly starts to break down. And then you have a wagon with about 60 to 80 people, and they go through all these different emotions when they slowly start to realize this is not good. And we know that people do sometimes weird stuff when they go emotionally completely out of it. For instance, in Sobibor, there are people that actually testified that when the Dutch Jews came to Sobibor, Sobibor is terrible. If you go there to the train station, there are two super cute Tiroler houses with curtains, with flowers. There's actually an orchestra playing music to welcome you. And when the door opened, there's actually people lining up to help you with your luggage, help you to get out of the train. When you give your luggage to a person, you receive a number thinking that you'll get your luggage back. So people got to the train station, and then they came an SS officer, his nickname was the preacher, because he stood there and he said, "Dear people from the Netherlands, we're very sorry you had such a hard trip and a hard burden to get here. We know that you've been in the train for 3 days and 2 nights. You must feel disgusting, you must feel hungry, you must feel dirty. Well, don't worry, this is just a transition camp. Here you can have something to eat. We will clean your clothes and you can clean yourself." Now we all know what happens then. But there's actually people who saw it. They saw the Dutch Jews applaud, thinking, "Oh, now you see it's not so bad. You know, it will be okay." Yeah, so, and they just take off their clothes. They fold them neatly. They put their shoelaces together to make sure that the shoes stay together. And they stand in line. And then they just walk into the shower because they look like showers. And in Sobibor, they did not use the Xylon B gas like in Auschwitz. In Sobibor, they used a diesel engine. And then the exhaust pipe back into a room 4 by 4 meter. And they found out that if you push 200 people inside, it takes 30 minutes before everyone is suffocated. And then at the back, the doors had to be opened. There were a Jew commander that had to take out the bodies. They had to check the bodies to see if there's no hidden valuables in the teeth and any opening you can find. And then the bodies were tossed in a big open fire. Now, one of the ladies that survived is Selma Weinberg from Zwolle. She actually lived her life in America and she wrote many books about her life. And she is a survivor of the resistance as well, because her husband, Chaim, is one of the Polish Jews that actually orchestrated the whole resistance. But she tells us that she had to work there. She was part of the Canada Commando. And that meant that she had to go through the luggage, sort the luggage, because everything that the Jews took with them to the east, to the camps, it was reused for the German war effort. Everything, including the hair that were shaven. It was used for the fillings of mattresses, for making blankets, for making socks, whatever you can think of. She tells us that one of her jobs was also to take care of the vegetable garden. And once in a time, she receives a bucket of ashes that she has to pour over the vegetables to make them grow better. And you can imagine where the ashes are coming from. So that is what they did, and that is how they used the trains to make sure that the people vanished. They disappeared. There's nothing left of them. And because of that, we actually have a memorial place there which remembers all the 102,000 Dutch Jews or German Jews that were here in Westerbork, that were deported and never returned. And I'd like to go there now.
Just before we go,
Yeah.
when we were in Bergen op Zoom, the president of the Liberation Foundation, who helped organize the events there, was asking me some questions about where we were going. And when I mentioned we were coming to this camp, his face went white. Both his parents and his grandparents were shipped out from this camp to Czechoslovakia. They were on this, yes, and they were on the train right after Anne Frank. Fortunately for his family, they actually returned at the end of the war, and his family members all lived to be in their late 80s and even 90s. But his parents never talked, or his grandparents never even talked about this camp. That was 4 years of their life here and in Czechoslovakia that they just totally forgot, and well, they never forget, but they just didn't talk about it and share that information. So he was unable to give any more information to us about his family. But so they left on the 4th of September 1944. And if you listen behind us, you can actually hear names being named. And part of the memorial with the train car is they name all the people on the date that they departed from this camp. And so his family members are Bowman and Bowman Cohen.
Yeah, in September 1944 there were 3 trains to make sure this campsite would be as empty as possible. And on the 3rd of September 1944 it was the train to Auschwitz, in which Anne Frank, for instance, was, and her family got deported to Auschwitz. And on the 4th of September 1944 they went to Theresienstadt. Now Theresienstadt is actually the camp where you had the highest possibility to survive, because Theresienstadt was an example camp as well, because the front of Theresienstadt was used by the Nazis to lure international organizations like the Red Cross to come there and to show and prove that they are doing nothing wrong and that they're just laborers and just people working hard. And if you see the propaganda movies of Theresienstadt, you can see the Jews, you know, with a big smile working like, yeah, nothing wrong, yeah. So that is Theresienstadt. And to give you an example of why people didn't know or always kept a hope is for instance the story of Herman Meijer. He came here because he was Jew, but he was also a pharmacist, so he could make medication. So he stayed for a very long time here, but he had to leave on the same train, September the 4th. But when he got to Theresienstadt, there was one thing in his mind that he learned here. Working is staying. Working means I stay alive. So he went to look for a job, but hey, Theresienstadt was perfect, right? So there was no job for him there. And so an SS officer came to him and he said, do you really want to have a job? Well, there's a camp further in the east. They are still in need of people like you. So he volunteered with his wife and his son, Leo, 10 years old, to go to the other camp because he thought working is staying, working is alive. So when he got to Auschwitz, Charlotte was killed, Leo was killed, and he survived. And when he came back after the war and started to tell about his story and to educate us to tell his story, he said, there's only one thing that will never leave me. I feel guilty for killing my wife, for being so naive, and killing my son, because I already stood with one foot in a camp of the Nazis where people were killed, and I was too blind to see. I always tell him, but you could never know, it's not your fault, but that's not how he feels. And that's also one of the problems with many of the Jews that didn't dare to talk, because they have the biggest question, why am I still alive? And they cannot talk about it. It's really hard. I can totally understand. Yeah.
So we should move on.
Yeah, this little
no,
time.
We definitely appreciate it.
Oh, man. Can I start, or is he?
He's just tuning up
Oh, okay.
because he hasn't played all day.
All right.
So once he stops,
Okay.
I told him I said you only got a very short time.
Yeah. So we're in one of the most important places of the campsite, because this is a memorial made for those who passed away, who died. So what you can see here are 102,000 stones that actually remember us of each and every person that did not return from the East. Now maybe it's hard to see, but it's actually made inside the map of the Netherlands. We are right now in the lighter part, it's the IJsselmeer. You're actually now in the north part of Holland, North Holland. So this is where Amsterdam would be. This is Utrecht, so that's the northern part, Friesland, Groningen, Drenthe. You can see Limburg in the corner and Zeeland with the small islands in that corner. Just to show you that the Jews, they were taken from every corner of the Netherlands to be taken here and then to be taken to the east. Now the different heights is just to tell you that there's been people here from all different ages that were taken from us. And you can see also that we have a few differences, because here we can see most of them are the David stars, but there's also other people that got deported and we cannot forget them as well. So the flames that you see here are remembrance for those who are Roma and Sinti, or gypsies as you call them. There were 245 in the Netherlands that were taken here and then deported towards Auschwitz as well. And so this is actually a place where we try to remember 102,000 persons, because there's no grave anywhere in the world for them. We know, for instance, there's a stone for Anne Frank in Bergen-Belsen, but we have no idea where her body is, because it's actually been put into one of the mass graves where more than 5,000 people or bodies are lying in. And all the others, they turned into ashes, or when they had to do the death marches going from one camp to another camp, they were just left to die somewhere on the roadside in Europe. And maybe this is a good place also for you to do your remembrance.
Karen Dimick, who is our unofficial 1st Battalion Black Lodge chaplain, Padre. I'm now going to turn it over to Karen.
Thank you. It's hard to find words. I think you can understand. It is one of those moments probably for silence more than anything, but I would like to say a few words about remembering. We talk in the Christian faith and in the Jewish faith that many of these people we're remembering today expressed an understanding of God remembering us is a thing that gives us hope, that in that God brings us into God's presence, and God's presence is with us. Through our time in the last week, we've done a lot of that ourselves. We've learned how important it is for us as human beings to remember, that when names are spoken, when we remember, we bring them back, even as their lives are lost, we bring their presence back into our living. Their lives touch ours, the remembrance of them becomes part of who we are, and their lives touch ours and continue in some mysterious way in the way we live. We are called to, it's hard in places like this. Saskia talked about when you're in pain, what do you do? But sometimes from places of great sorrow, we find commitments to be kind and to seek justice. Again, the words are not enough, but the remembering matters, and in the remembering there is always, I pray there is always hope in the remembering. And as we've remembered all week, we remember when we come here today.
last, what I would like to show you is the other memorial that we have, which is the train tracks that go up. You might have seen in pictures. So let's go there.
Where's Anne Frank's picture?
There's no name on any stone, and the pictures that you see here are actually from the first train that left on July 15, 1942. There were 1,187 people on board that train, and we try to put their picture up as many as we have, but as you can see we don't have all of them yet. But we don't have a special place here for Anne Frank. No, you can just pick a stone and remember her.
Okay.
Proud.
So before we go to the last area, I would like to show you one of the original buildings as well, which is only partially. But this was one barrack of the 120 barracks that was actually here on the camp terrain, which is only 500 by 500. You can see that everyone was squashed together. It was really narrow and tight. So one barrack was 18 meters long. That's why you can see the iron parts going all the way back there. So that was 18 meters and 10 meters wide. Now in the beginning they were actually built for 200 to maybe 300 persons. But when more and more Russias came and more people were being picked up in the Netherlands and taken here, there were more than 1,000 people inside one barrack. Women on one side, men on the other side. You were not allowed to sleep together, even though if you were a couple. And the women also had the youngest children. Now on the small picture here, you can actually see the insides of one of the barracks, and you can see they had the bunk beds, which were 3 high. And each and every one wanted to have the upper one, of course, because at the upper part you had the most breathable air. But you also used the construction to put your materials like your suitcases on, because there were so many people here. They had like a military regime, so everything had to be nice and tidy and neat, and everything that was on the floor was common use. So if you left your suitcase on the floor, it meant it's for everyone, so you had to leave it on your bed. So a young woman with 2 little children and a suitcase are all in one bed, for instance. So it was a harsh life. You do have to realize that the people who actually saw Camp Westerbork as it was, as the village, as Gemmeke created, there are only a few. Because most of them stayed here 1 day, 2 days, maybe a week, and at the end of the war, maybe a month. Like Anne Frank, she stayed here for only 1 month. It's because in the campsite they also quickly came to realize we need to put the people on the train. So those who are coming in last are the first ones that needs to leave on the train as well. So there's actually only a few that actually knew the camp for more than 4 or 5 years. But one of the most important parts is of course the train. We're going there right now, that's the last bit. But I'd like to tell you one more thing, because Anne Frank stayed here with her family for more than a month. If you look to the back side there, you can actually see extra barbed wire, because she was she was punished. Because she was undercover, she was in hiding. And that meant she was here in an extra secured area, but she had to work. She was 14 years old, so she had to work in the recycling business. So she had to take batteries apart. And she did that in the barrack behind me. So when we go to the last memorial, if you'd like, you can cross over the heightened area, because then you're walking and where Anne Frank was walking as well for a month in 1944, if you like. Be careful, it could be slippery. Well, we don't have a lot of time anymore because I believe you have an appointment with the mayor of Groningen. So I will keep it really short. But this is one of our most important memorial places as well, as you can see. And as you know, on the May 4th, we remember those who died, and that's what we did here as well. And that's why you see so many flowers and so many stones. So the rail track is not originally anymore, but it symbolizes, of course, the trains that happened and the trains that made it happen for the people to be deported. So this is actually the site where we remember each and every person, all 107,000 people that were taken to the east. And that is the memorial for the 102,000 that never returned. Now there's a lot of symbolic elements, of course, but the most important part are the beams on the floor. They're exactly 97. There are 93 attached to the railways, saying though those are the 93 trains that left from here. And there were 4 trains from different parts of the Netherlands, one from Vught, 2 from Amsterdam, and 1 from Apeldoorn, where you had the big psychiatric hospital, and they cleared the hospital as well and took those people to Auschwitz immediately as well. And so this is where we remember them, and we have one very important element of the memorial that we always explain to the youth, because our educational program here is very big. We receive more than 200 to 400 kids per day, starting from the age of 10, 11 until 18, 19 that come here within school programs. And we try to explain them why there are white stones on the outside of the memorial. Because these are the white stones that stands for those who stood by and did nothing. Now we cannot judge for any of those persons during World War II why they didn't do anything, because there was never a sabotage or resistance action towards Camp Westerbork trying to liberate the Jews here. It was very hard to do so as well, because we see the beautiful forest right now, but it wasn't a forest back then. It was a meadow and bog area as far as you can see. So it was really hard to get nearby the campsite as well. But we always say that whenever something happens again which is not good, you have the person who does it and you have the victim. But the third group are those who stand by and do nothing. And we try to tell the children that we tell these stories about Westerbork, about the incredible cruel things people can do to each other, because you have those who do it and those who receive it. But we cannot be the white stone anymore. We cannot be a person standing by and doing nothing anymore. We should learn. I mean, it's hard to learn from history, but we should. So we try to tell the kids, please do not be a white stone anymore. Just tell someone that something goes wrong. And that is our main important story that we want to tell here. And that is how we try to remember and acknowledge what happened and try to learn from it if we can. I took too much of your time already.
I would like to call Lieutenant Colonel Francis Watt, please. We have a presentation because this was unexpected. We appreciate the tour. Thank you.
Oh, no problem at all.
Stay with me. So, from all of the Black Watch family and friend of the Black Watch, we want to give you this gift.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Stay with me.
Wow. Thank you.
And also we have a souvenir coin of our trip.
Oh,
It's
wow.
your moment to
for
shine.
you and one for Patrick.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for all of your help.
Yeah, it's been my honor. And whenever you come back and you want to hear more stories, let me know. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Yeah, thank you so much.
I really like that.
See, lunchtime ticket. Oh, already.
Oh, we're just going.
Ja.
The Mayor Koen Schouwing to join you today in the City Hall of Groningen to commemorate the liberation of the city and the pivotal role Canada played in giving us back our freedom. I'm Joel Stappels, your guide for the coming days in the city, mainly the historian for the part of the liberation. And in the Netherlands we celebrate our liberation every month of May, and we underline the important role young Canadian servicemen and women played in achieving lasting freedom for us. And the heroic deeds of the Canadian Army, including soldiers from the Black Watch of Canada and Regiment de Maisonneuve, were decisive in the liberation of Groningen and in bringing the war in Europe to an end. The 43 soldiers from Canada who were killed during the liberation of the city lie to rest in the war cemetery of Holten, where I attended the commemoration on May the 4th. The war may be a long time ago, but our gratitude for the courageous efforts of young Canadian servicemen and women has remained. We will remember them. We all have our responsibility to pass these memories on to the next generations. In the city of Groningen, we have several monuments that remind us of the liberation in April 1945. These monuments will also remind future generations and visitors of the crucial role that Canada played in our history. It also represents the close ties that we developed since and between our two countries. During your visit, we will also visit a few of these monuments and the Canadian stories, and I will tell you more about these monuments later during the tour through the city. But first, I would like to invite the Mayor of Groningen, Koen Schouwing, for a speech.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are here in the Anna Kerkhoven-zaal. Anna Kerkhoven is over there. She was a member of the resistance, a young student, and she was killed in the last days of the Second World War. And we thought it would be an honor to us all to remember her by naming her, and that's why she is with us today and every day in the year. So good afternoon. It's a great honor to welcome you all to Groningen. And I'm grateful that this tour to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the Netherlands is now underway after a 3-year delay. And I'm even more grateful that the representatives of both the Black Watch of Canada and the Regiment de Maisonneuve are here with us today. Your regiment played a decisive role in the liberation of Groningen. And your presence here today reminds us of those historic, heroic, and heavy-hearted April days of 1945. 43 young Canadians gave their lives for Groningen, the ultimate sacrifice to ensure the liberty of people they didn't even know. We can only admire and be grateful for their courage and determination. The Battle for Groningen was one of the largest urban battles of the Second World War for the Canadian Army. When the Canadian forces approached our city from the south on April the 13th, 1945, they met with fierce resistance. Even though the German defenders were poorly organized, they were highly motivated to slow down the Allied advance as much as possible. The Germans had blown up several crucial bridges, and placed a large number of snipers and machine gun nests throughout the city. In Groningen, streets proved too narrow for the Canadian tanks. Soldiers fought the battle with handguns and grenades. They had to take street by street, bridge by bridge, house by house. Groningers hiding in their cellars are known to have heard English in the living room and German in the kitchen at the same time. After days of heavy fighting, especially on the central market square, the Germans surrendered on April 16th. The Dutch flag was hoisted on the Martini Tower. The Canadians handed out white bread, cigarettes and chocolate, and it is said that in the town hall the liberation was celebrated with large quantities of Geneva, or gin, as you probably know it. Last week on May the 5th, we commemorated and celebrated our liberation nationwide. In Groningen, we did so in the so-called Bevrijdingsbos, or Liberation Wood, a forest of 30,000 maples, which honors the sacrifices of the Canadian troops. It is the greenest and largest liberation monument in the Netherlands. In 2005, in celebration of the 60th anniversary of the liberation, a monument was placed in the pond of the Bevrijdingsbos. The monument represents a maple leaf. In the leaf, there are holes representing the 43 Canadians who lost their lives. The veins which provide growth represent youth and hope for the future. The doves flying out are a symbol of freedom and children's right, a call to all people to protect, defend and celebrate these achievements. And every time I visit the Bevrijdingsbos and look at the monuments, I realize that even though I will never know what those young men were thinking and feeling when they lost their lives in battle, I feel the enormity of the sacrifices they made, the marks they made on history, and how their lives are forever intertwined with ours, across time and generations. We owe your regiments our freedom, and we will never forget at what cost it came. The stories we share today show us again and again that freedom can only be achieved together. They show us that a deep connection between people can exist. People who have never met before. That some will say, I will travel the world and risk my life to make sure you can be free. Your tour through the Netherlands, honoring the wartime pipe band and the regimental members who fought here and lost their lives, convinces me that this bond still exists, and that even today we know that in time of dire need, we can count on each other. That is a hopeful message you take with you. Thank you.
Thank you. There are still some bread for for you to take during the tour. Thank you, Koen Schuiling, for your wonderful speech. After the lunch, we need to depart. Think over the time. After half an hour, so 15 past 2. Then we need to go outside because we need to clean this room. And I will pick it up and I will guide you through the Provinciehuis and tell you more about the battles what happened on the Great Market on the way with pictures and so on. So, thank you.
Go.
Good evening. Good day, everyone. Again, Mayor, please. A little from Black Watch family and from all of the people here for your hospitality and your good words. The plate, a souvenir from the Black Watch and our return here.
Thank you very much.
I want to, this is also a coin. That in Canada we give it like this. Okay?
Thank you very much.
I'm a sandwich.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your hospitality. It's much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you.
For Joel, I think that with Eric since 4 years.
4 years.
Eric planned this trip for all the people, and I think you have a lot of complication, and because of the COVID, we postponed, so I give for you,
Okay, thank you.
okay, and
Yeah.
coin,
Thank you.
and please with a picture.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a 2023 version of aerial bombing. Bon après-midi tout le monde. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for sharing that commemoration ceremony with us today. First, I will ask Sarah Lecomte Bergeron to share with us l'acte du souvenir.
Ils ne vieilliront pas comme nous qui leur avons survécu. Ils ne connaîtront jamais l'outrage, ni le poids des années. Quand viendra l'heure du crépuscule et celle de l'aurore, nous nous souviendrons d'eux.
We'll ask Terry Hunter to share with us the act of remembrance.
They shall grow not old, as we who are left grow old. Age shall not worry them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
This concludes our ceremony. Thank you again, everybody, for attending. Joel will go give us the detail for the rest of our afternoon. Please, Joel.
Thank you. Hello everybody, I'm your guide. We're going to do a short tour before we go to the provincial house. We start at the backside of the city hall because I explained something about the war damage that can be seen, and then we going through the fair because we're building up here everything to the Martini Tower, which you can see over there, and I will explain a little bit more about the Battle of the Great Market, so the Grote Markt here, because it's ruined partly the southern part of this Grote Markt, most of the buildings, as you can see. So stay close to each other, because otherwise I'm going to lose you somewhere during the tour. So first we're going to start on the back side of the City Hall and then walk all the way to the Martini Tower. Okay? Get my backpack.
Well, there's bombing damage there, but bullets are shell damage.
Okay, welcome to the back side of the City Hall. As you can see, the City Hall is still there, and as you can see on the right side, so it's the southern part of the Great Market, is completely rebuilt, and that is as a result of the heavy fighting that took place here on April the 15th, 1945. But before I'm going to start with the whole battle, we're going back to Nijmegen, because that was also the starting point of the 2nd Canadian Infantry Division to advance all the way up to the northern part of the Netherlands. It was also under the operation called Plunder. Now Plunder, this operation, the end goal of Operation Plunder was for the 2nd Canadian Infantry Division, the city of Groningen. Now between Nijmegen and Groningen there are not really hard battles, because the Germans are retreating really fast, blowing up a lot of bridges, of course causing delays during the advance, because I spoke with a lot of Canadian veterans and they told me always the bloody canals in Holland, because when you're going to blow up a bridge then you need bailing material, and of course it's going to delay the advance. Now, before you arrived in Groningen, you visited Kamp Westerbork, and it was the province of Drenthe. So when the Canadians advanced from the south and entered the province of Drenthe, there was a parachute commander with the name Calvert. And he had 702 French paratroopers of the Special Air Service, and they were still sitting in the UK waiting for action. And they also saw that the war was almost over, so they were a little bit anxious to go before the war ends, and they didn't see any action. So they decided to start the last airborne operation in the Second World War, and it's called Operation Amherst. And in the night of the 7th till the 8th of April 1945, 702 French paratroopers were dropped in the province of Drenthe to connect with the 2nd Canadian Infantry Division, who were moving really fast all the way up to Groningen. 33 French paratroopers were killed, and it was unnecessary action, because when you can see on a broad scale what the Canadian Infantry Division had as reconnaissance units, you can say it was not really useful, this operation, but okay, the French paratroopers had their action at the end of the war. The 2nd Canadian Infantry Division liberated Kamp Westerbork, arrived in Assen, big city before Groningen, was liberated on April the 13th, 1945, and then the Canadians were standing before the southern part of the city of Groningen. Now the city itself, as you can see, is a beautiful city with a lot of small roads. The mayor Koen Schuiling already told in his speech, or spoke about it, is that you can't deploy tanks here. We had 50 tanks of the 4th Gary Horse Battalion who were attached to the 2nd Canadian Infantry Division, who support the infantry. But you can understand that there were a lot of Germans here with anti-tank weapons, like a Panzerfaust. And you're in the upper floor with your Panzerfaust, you can quickly knock out a German tank. So the first fighting started in the southern part of Groningen on April the 13th, 1945, and it was also a Friday, so Friday the 13th. The first tank was knocked out by the 4th Gary Horse. The Royal Hamilton Light Infantry was fighting really hard, and in the evening on Friday the 13th, already 16 Canadians were killed. And the Major General, A.B. Matthews, the commander of the 2nd Canadian Infantry Division, there were his own words, "This is going to be a tough one." And then he decided to deploy his whole 2nd Canadian Infantry Division to liberate the city of Groningen. So from two sides, from the southern part and the northeastern part. Now the problem what the Canadians faced during the liberation of Groningen is all the bloody canals here and 14 bridges. Most of the bridges in the southern part were blown up. The other problem was the civilians, because they were still here in Groningen. And a lot more civilians, because we had a lot of refugees from the western part of the Netherlands, because we had a hunger winter over there in Amsterdam and Den Haag, and they were all fleeing to the northern part here in Groningen, because we had a lot of farmers here still and a lot of food. The German commander here had the orders to hold the city at all costs. Why? Because it was the last escape route for the Germans to go to Delfzijl. It's a harbor in the northern part of Groningen, and from there you can have a boat to Germany, to Emden. That was the main reason. Now we had around 7,000 Germans here. That's a lot. Mainly Kriegsmarine, but also some SS troops. But the problem was also, we had also fanatical SS troops with civilian clothes. Now can you understand, when you have a civilian with civilian clothes, a sniper behind a window, it's really dangerous. And also here in Groningen we can say we are relaxed people. And that was also a problem, because during the fighting people came outside asking for cigarettes and chocolate, and it was not really good because we had a lot of snipers, and that was result in 110 civilian casualties. And we have even pictures of civilians sitting on a bench outside looking for the fighting. And there is even a story about Captain Blackburn. He wrote a book, was a forward observation officer who was fighting in the southern part of Groningen, and he was in one of the doors, and there was somebody going outside, and he was a little bit afraid it was a German, but it was a young boy of 50 years old with cups of coffee during the fighting. So you can imagine they didn't see any danger, and that resulted in high casualties of civilians. Now after the heavy fighting, the division of the Black Watch Battalion, Regiment Maisonneuve, were advancing from the northeast on the Wednesday in the morning. I'll explain more about it because we're going to visit the area where they fought. And then on the 15th April 1945, two battalions approached the Great Market. This is the western part and from the southern part. The western part, this was the South Squadron Regiment, and from the southern part was the Les Fusiliers Montreal. Now, it was not that the all battalions arrived here, there were companies, so two companies here and two companies over there. Now, they arrived here and it was heavy fighting because the Germans decided it will be the last stand. So there were around 600 Germans still on the southern part of the Great Market with the German commander, it was called Major Maciek, who refused to surrender. So we decided this will be the last stand, we're going to fight till the last man and the last bullets. Now also in this area was heavy fighting. Luckily this building was saved. This was a shipyard museum, and in the night of Saturday 14th till Sunday the 15th, the fire brigade decided to evacuate all the museum objects to a cafe on the north side of the Great Market. Now you can imagine we were busy the whole night to evacuate all the historical objects, and after the Battle of Groningen the whole north side was completely in ruins, inclusive the whole collection of the Shipyard Museum. Now this building was saved mainly because of brave firefighters that tried to keep the building wet during the fighting. Now the rest of the buildings, there were two buildings on the left side, were completely gone. So luckily this building was saved. Also the City Hall was saved because the Germans decided not to defend the City Hall because you're quickly surrounded. It's between two squares. Now you can still see here some war damage, and I have a picture. I will show you, I will give you the picture so that you can see it in detail. Now there was a Sherman tank of the Fort Garry Horse approaching from the main shopping street. It was the Herenstraat, and in that time, from a position where I'm standing, you had a good view on this street. And this tank decided to fire with this vertical machine gun, because there were still Germans behind this building, the Gold Office. It's called the Gold Office building, and it ricocheted from this wall to the Germans behind the Gold Office. And why they didn't deploy their gun, the 75mm gun, because then the whole building was gone. And the Canadian veterans after the war had a good name for it. The fighting in the Netherlands was like the Porcelain War. Because we need to be careful, the Dutch are our allies, so we need to be careful with their property and don't shoot at all the buildings. We have of course other stories in Germany, like Friesheute, where a complete village was gone during the fighting, but not in the Netherlands. So the Canadians also fighting here, trying to save the buildings as much as possible. Now this is sort of a regimental plaque commemorating the liberation of Groningen between April the 13th and April the 16th, 1945. And we were still really happy that this building is still here and that we can provide you the lunch inside. And of course, this beautiful building, the Gold Office, because a lot of people who visiting Groningen are falling in love with this building.
That's right, I'm looking at that.
Okay. Yeah.
Here, and it's one of the cells.
On the southern part, tactical headquarters. Now the South Squadron Regiment advanced from the Fish Market, arrived at the City Hall, and then a firefight started between the 600 Germans on this side and around 600 Canadians on the southern side. Now the firefight was until 4 o'clock, and then all of a sudden a guy in a civilian clothes with a white flag appeared, and everybody stops firing, also the German side and the Canadian side, and this civilian approached the tactical headquarters of the Les Fusiliers Montreal. It was in this case the tactical headquarters of Lieutenant Jimmy Dextrace, and he had a translator, was called a Dutchman, Sergeant Workum, and he arrived over there and he asked in a little bit dialect of Gronings, "Wils verstopt met schuit?" That in English is this, "Please stop firing because I'm tired of it." Now, the commander, Jimmy Dextrace, with his translator, because of course it was a French-Canadian battalion. So he given French answer back, and this civilian from Groningen was completely confused because he was thinking, okay, I have a Tommy in front of me and he's speaking French. But of course there was a Dutch translator telling him, "Get the hell out of here, we are in the middle of a battle." Now this guy is going to the other side, to the Fish Market, also asking the commander of the South Squadron Regiment, "Can you stop firing?" But also there he get a negative answer. What happened in the end, he was a jeweler, and he had a store on the east side and in the Zwanestraat. It's nearby the Great Market. And both buildings were occupied by German soldiers. And he was afraid that during the fighting, both buildings will be destroyed. But it happened on the east side because it was completely blown up by the Canadians. Now, after that, half an hour, the Canadians decided, okay, now it's time again, we go and fire again. So the whole battle started again. Now the tanks from the Fort Garry Horse also approached the Great Market. And then we're going to wait for the siren because otherwise I have no voice anymore. So then till 8:30 in the evening, the Canadians decided with a radio wagon to ask the German commander on this side to surrender. So in German, there was a Canadian translator. In German, they set an ultimatum, half an hour, and then you need to surrender. But after half an hour, it was already 9 o'clock in the evening, no white flag, no sign that the Germans want to surrender. And then the Canadian tanks from the Fort Garry Horse, Sherman tanks, but also some Stuarts, firing to the east of the north side. And then the Germans decided on 10 o'clock in the evening to evacuate the whole Great Market. But before they evacuate everything, they had big drums with gasoline, 200 liters, and they set fire on this building, these buildings on the north side and the buildings on the east side, because it was also the headquarters of the Sicherheitsdienst. And then 200 Germans were fleeing in the provincial house, and there they stayed till April the 16th, 1945. We're going to walk over there shortly, and I will explain there how the surrender went. Now, the fire was terrible, and it destroyed the north side and the east side. And after the liberation of Groningen, they cleared all the rubble, and from the 1950s they built these buildings again. But it was not a lot of people in Groningen like the buildings, because and especially this side really ugly. But that was the reason, because in that time there was not a lot of money to rebuild everything again. So it needs to be quickly and good. So yeah, this is the result of the fighting. Now the Les Fusiliers Montreal battalion and the South Squadron regiment had 460 Germans. They made a prisoner here at the Great Market, and the 200 under the command of Maciek are fleeing to the other side. Now the Martini Tower, it's also a story on itself, because when you look over here, you can still see the bullet holes, the war damage after 78 years, so it's still visible. Now, in 1940s, when the Germans invaded the Netherlands, they quickly see this tower and they think, okay, we're going to build up in the tower a sort of radio equipment to connect with the airfield nearby. When the Allied bombers flew over Groningen, then we could contact the German fighter planes directing to the Allied bombers. Now there was a guy who was responsible, it was called Meneer van Swieteren, who was responsible for the restoration project, because they were busy restoring the tower. And in 1943 he entered the barracks and he found there 40 kilos of explosives. That's really a lot. So he was so shocked by seeing this that he was asking the German commander, what are you going to do? And he told him, when the Tommies of our Americans are in front of the city, we're going to blow up the whole tower. Now he was so shocked by this answer, he visited the mayor, but he was a collaborator, and asked him, can you please save the tower? But his mayor told him, no, I have other concerns, not the tower, and he's sending him away. But he bought 2 big hammers, arrived again at the tower, gave the German commander the 2 big hammers, and he told him, okay, you can smash the radio equipment with the hammers, and you don't have to blow up the whole tower. And that happened in the end. April the 16th, 1945, Meneer van Swieteren arrived at the tower, and he was still seeing the tower, and the Germans smashed the radio equipment with the big hammers. And luckily, it didn't blow up the whole tower. But this is still war damage left from the fighting in 1945. Now we go to the monument, the 4th May monument for all the victims of the Second World War. Of course, Mayor Koen Schuilinga already told you that there was a commemoration here for the main commemoration for the Second World War victims during our commemoration in the Netherlands. So we have always the main commemoration in the Netherlands on the 4th of May. 2 minutes before 8 we have 2 minutes of silence, and then we lay wreaths. This is the big commemoration in the province of Groningen, because it's the city, so it's the biggest city of the province of Groningen. And of course we always commemorate here with a lot of organizations, and it's always broadcasted on a regional television for the rest of the province. But all the small communities, all the small towns have their own commemoration on the 4th of May, and a lot of people are still attending all the commemorations. Because as you know, we have not a lot of survivors anymore of what happened here, of course. Last week I had a Canadian veteran coming over here, 98 years old. So they are still there, but it's not a lot of them travel again here to the Netherlands to visit the commemoration. So yeah, it's now, as you can see, we closed off the center for traffic. Only traffic to the center is possible from here, but the rest, everything is closed off in the center. So we don't allow any trucks or cars anymore in the center. And then,
Except for our bus.
except for your bus, of course, because you're a VIP. Okay, you can see it over here. This is the provincial house, but in the war was it called the local archives from Groningen. And it was April the 16th, 1945, and there were around 200 Germans in the morning in this building, entrenched themselves with heavily machine guns and a lot of grenades around them, anti-tank weapons, and the German garrison commander was on the second floor. Now, Mayor Jimmy Dextrace, the lieutenant, was busy with his German prisoners on the Great Market on the morning, and then all of a sudden a German sniper killed one of his men on a motorcycle. And his nickname he earned in Normandy Mad. He was really mad because he had already, the liberation of Groningen was already was already happening, and the battle was almost over, and one of his guys was killed by the sniper. So he got 2 German prisoners out of the big group prisoners he had taken during the Battle of the Great Market, set them in front of a Brengen carrier with white flags, and asking them, okay, can you point out where is the German garrison commander? Now, they point out the direction, so they drove in their carrier, Sergeant Borkum, the Dutch translator, and Jimmy Dextrace in front of this building, and then the door was open, and Jimmy Dextrace and Sergeant Borkum jumped out of the carrier and is standing in front of this building, and we're thinking, okay, what are we going to do? Are we yelling inside, you need to surrender, or are we going inside? Because they also knew that there were a lot of Germans inside with a lot of weapons, of course. Now, Jimmy Dextrace lights up a cigarette. Sergeant Borkum watched him and said, okay, I'm going to do it also. So he lights also a cigarette, with hands in the pockets. They walk inside. Now, when they were inside, nobody was firing, nothing happened. Only the sound of German boots. And that was the German garrison commander who was walking downstairs, and he was in the middle, and looking eye in eye with Jimmy Dextrace. And then Jimmy, who kept the silence, and then asked with the translator, are you surrendering? And the German garrison commander told him, nein, ich kapituliere nicht. Don't want, I refused to surrender. And then Jimmy Dextrace told him, okay, I have 2,000 of your men captured in nearby prisoner of war camps. The war is over. And he wanted to see it with his own eyes, so that this was allowed. So the German garrison commander were also in a Brengen carrier, and they drove to a local prisoner of war camp, and he saw that his staff was captured, 2,000 German soldiers, and then he discussed with his staff, okay, we are going to surrender. So they drove back to the archives, and then he gives the order to the rest of the German soldiers to disarm and surrender. And that was around 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Monday, April the 16th, 1945. And later on there was a journalist from the Canadian Free Press interviewing Jimmy Dextrace, and Jimmy explained later that he was really afraid when he was walking inside, but he wants to be nonchalant, a little bit relaxed, with his hands in the pockets and the cigarettes in his mouth. So we explained to a lot of people Groningen was liberated by lighting a cigarette. Now, what happened afterwards is that there was some fighting in the eastern part and the northern part of Groningen, and in the evening, around midnight on April the 16th, the Battle of Groningen was formally over. Now, Jimmy Dextrace received a bar for a Distinguished Service Order, and Sergeant Borkum received a military medal. for what happened here in the Rijksarchives. Now, when they cleaned the whole building, they found a lot of ammunition that was hid away on the floors, behind windows. Everything was hid away. And why? Because the German garrison commander had an order: fight till the last bullet. So the Germans were thinking, okay, well, we need to hide a lot of ammunition, then we don't have to fight anymore. Now, this is also a little bit what the motivation for most of the Germans was when they were fighting in Groningen. Was most of them saw already the war was over. We have, of course, fanatical troops like SS'ers and Dutch SS and Belgian SS still fighting over here. And the rumors were that the Canadians don't take any SS prisoner. So they were thinking, okay, we're going to fight to the last bullet, the last man, because we are not afraid to die. That was the mentality. Now, the Canadian Provost Corps made a balance about the costs for the Battle of Groningen, and 166 Canadians were wounded, 43 were killed, and around 300 to 400 Germans were killed during the battle. Now, the 2nd Canadian Infantry Division stayed over here till April the 19th, 1945. Then there was a ceremony at the City Hall where the mayor, who was Cort van der Linde, was a new mayor for Groningen, received A.B. Matthews, the commander of the 2nd Canadian Infantry Division, and made him honorary citizen. And in return, A.B. Matthews gave him a big garrison flag, and it was still in the archives, a Canadian garrison flag. Now, the 2nd Canadian Infantry Division moved from the 19th April 1945 to Assen, and from Assen all the way to Zwissenheim in Germany. And from Zwissenheim they advanced to Oldenburg when they experienced the end of the war. It was May the 3rd, 1945, and luckily there was no fighting anymore for Oldenburg because the German commander surrendered over there. Now, there was another division that arrived over here, the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division. There was a brigade, 7th Canadian Infantry Brigade, Royal Winnipeg Rifles, Regina Rifles, and the Canadian Scottish, still battalions active, I think, in Canada. And they get the orders to move into the province of Groningen and to make the first contacts around the so-called Delfzijl pockets. It was a harbor in the northern part of Groningen and was heavily defended by German coastal guns and a lot of German soldiers from the German Kriegsmarine. Now, even the Canadian Scottish, they lost on one day a whole company fighting over there. Even the company commander, Captain Lundy, who landed on the 6th of June at 7 o'clock at Juno Beach and was killed nearby. Now, when they made the first contacts, there was a lot of fighting. They got the order to move from that area to Leer. They were fighting around the Battle of Leer, and then the 5th Canadian Armored Division arrived over here to clear the last remnants of the German defense around the pocket of Delfzijl. 2 weeks of heavy fighting, bad weather, no air support because of the bad weather, and heavy German shelling with calibers around 88 and 28 centimeters coastal guns. Can you imagine what hell must it be for a lot of Canadians, especially because the 5th Canadian Armored Division was moved from Italy in December 1945, arrived in the Netherlands in January, and most of them were killed in the northern part of Groningen, and they all survived the battles in Italy. So they landed in Sicily, landed in Salerno, Italy, and were killed here at the end of the war. Now, on the 2nd of May 1945, the German garrison commander in Delfzijl surrendered, and the last Canadian killed on Dutch shore during fighting actions was on the 2nd of May around 2 o'clock, and it was John Gerard Spicer from the Irish Regiment of Canada. Now, of course, we have Canadians who were killed by accidents or clearing mines afterwards, but this was the last Canadian during fighting actions in the Netherlands. Now, what happened was the rest of the Netherlands liberated on the 2nd of May? No, because we had in Wageningen, of course, the discussions about the surrender. There is always a miscommunication that the German surrender was signed in Wageningen, but that's not true, because we had, of course, Lunenburger Heide was already a surrender. It was only the discussion about how to surrender in Wageningen for mostly the Germans in the western part of the Netherlands. Now, after the surrender on the 6th of May 1945, the 1st Canadian Infantry Division moves from the area of Apeldoorn all the way up to Amsterdam and Den Haag and arrives over there between the 7th and 8th May 1945. Now, for Groningen, the Canadians have a special place. Already, Mayor Koen Schuiling already mentioned it in his speech, because, of course, you have a battle honor granted what happened over here, the Battle of Groningen, some of the battalions who were involved in the fighting, but also in Delfzijl. So the Delfzijl pocket, for example, for the Canadian Scottish is Wagenborgen and battle honor. That means that we have regiments coming here to participate in commemorations. We had the Essex Scottish, the Calgary Highlanders, and so there are still Canadians coming over here. Now, in their own words, with Canadian veterans who I spoke with, a little bit quotes what I received is, for example, the Battle of Delfzijl, where a couple of them said the worst battle I ever been in was the Battle of the Delfzijl pocket. So can you imagine, they were fighting in Italy and experienced here the worst battles. But also some members of the 2nd Canadian Infantry Division fighting over here, because it was one of the biggest urban fighting for the 2nd Canadian Infantry Division. Because in Normandy they had not really big cities, Caen, but it was already evacuated by the Germans. So that was the first big city. And of course you had a lot of civilians still trapped during the fighting in cellars, in panic, running outside. And what I already mentioned, 110 civilians were killed. Now, as a last story, funny story to tell, I received a couple of weeks ago the Calgary Highlanders fighting in one of the streets in Groningen. And there were two guys setting up a Brand machine gun in front of a small window on a small wooden table, and they heard some noise coming out of the cellar, and then an elderly woman appeared, and she's looking amazed what happened, and she's making coffee. So they're giving the guys coffee. One of the guys was still firing his Brand machine gun, gets his cup of coffee, but then she looked at a small wooden table and she get a pillow and asked him to try to get it under his tripod, because she was really afraid that the wooden table would be damaged by the fighting. So that's a lot of funny stories, but it also happened during wartime. Now, of course, you have also the touristic aspect of Groningen, because tomorrow in the afternoon you have free time, and free time is always great. Especially this building is really, a lot of people in Groningen, when they go when they build it, are really don't like it, but now a lot of people like it, because inside is a library. This is also a building who won the architectural prize last year from the Netherlands, and there is a cinema inside, but you can go all the way up, and it's a really beautiful view when you're on top. So especially this building is worth to visit when you have time in Groningen. We do a small detour and then we go and walk, and then we are here at the Provincial House exact on time.
How many people live in Groningen today?
Over 200,000.
200,000.
Yeah.
And back then, you know?
No, less. Yeah. I think maybe 30, 50. But that is also because we now, the municipality of Groningen is also bigger, because we have little towns now combined as one municipality. So that's also the reason. Outside we have also some more. Now this is when we have in Groningen a little bit touristic aspect, is that we have, of course, you see a lot of students. Groningen is like Amsterdam and also Nijmegen, and a student city. So we have a lot of student organizations. We have also a lot of universities over here. So we have a lot of international students, also from Canada. Sometimes providing also tours for Canadian students over here. So that means we have also a lot of pubs. You can already see. You're lucky because you're staying this coming days in the center. So you're quickly outside and can grab a beer. That's a good way. You have here a lot of pubs. You have here a lot of pubs, where we have a lot of in Groningen. And the funny thing of Groningen is also we don't have any closing times. So when the lights are out, the pub is closed. So you're completely lucky to be here. So for your, this is logistical, this is also the square where you're going to play in the evening. Because of all the attractions and all the stuff that's built on the Great Market is not available. So we have a permit for this area to march from a hotel to here. So it's a lot of space, I think, so, to be, and hopefully a lot of people arrive here to listen to you. Okay, walk over. Block the road. Okay, when you look over that plaque, see it over there? That was a plaque for the building that stood over here. It was a building from the Sicherheitsdienst, the German state police, and they were really active here in the city of Groningen. They were also responsible for rounding up the whole Jewish community here in Groningen. We have a synagogue. You can also visit that tomorrow in the afternoon. It's a museum right now, but we don't have any community anymore because most of the Germans, most of the Jewish people were all rounded up and brought to Camp Westerbork. We visited, and most of them were transferred to concentration camps later on and were killed. And this plaque is commemorating what happened because most of the resistance fighters, but also Jewish people, were locked up in this building. It was called Scholtenshuis. And during the liberation, this building was completely destroyed because the Germans themselves set it on fire. Maybe we think because of to destroy the evidence what is still there, and it could be renovated after the war, but the the council of the city of Groningen decided to get rid of it because of a lot of negative atmosphere around it, so that's also the reason, and therefore they decided to install this plaque for what happened here during the war. Now, I already mentioned the tactical headquarters of Jimmy Dextrace. It was in that hotel in the cellar, what's now the steakhouse Bronco. That was the tactical headquarters where also this jeweler came to ask for, will you stop firing? It was at that side, there was the tactical headquarters. These buildings all survived the battle. So when you look around, you can still see, these are the old buildings, the city hall. And this side was completely destroyed, the east side, and this side, so the north side. So it changed the site for the Great Market forever, because it were beautiful buildings, especially on the north side of the Great Market, and unfortunately they were completely destroyed at the end of the war. What we're now going to do is walk the same route and then go to the provincial house where the Commissioner of the King is waiting for us.
Or is it ours?
That might be yours, sir. Pleasure meeting you, sir.
We'll go behind it.
I'd like to raise a motion to get a new LRT for Ottawa. Yeah, exactly.
It was too much work to work the entire room. So I have to start with an apology for all the people I didn't shake hands with. Nevertheless, it's really nice to meet you and a warm welcome to you all. My name is René Paas. I'm the King's Commissioner in the province of Groningen, which is more or less the governor within our very difficult system. All systems are difficult when you look close at them. You must have heard the same words, the words of welcome, a lot of times during your visit in the Netherlands. I read your schedule, and it's an honor for us to host you in your commemorative tour in the Netherlands. Together with the Polish army, Canadian soldiers liberated our province, and we're very grateful for that. Canadians ended 5 years of German occupation. You met Koen Schuiling earlier today, and he and I take turns in the 4th of May, the national commemoration. We have here, just outside this old government building, we have the commemoration, and then we speak at the Remembrance Day. Each year we put flowers at the monument, but every other year we address the people. And in 2019 I recounted how just around the corner, actually almost in this same building, just another part of it, in the former state archives in the Sint-Jansstraat, the Germans surrendered to the Canadian liberators. In particular to Lieutenant Colonel Jacques Dekstraze. I'm sure you are familiar with his name. He managed to convince the Germans, and he was a very convincing man, that further fighting was pointless. And he was a man that made a big impression, not only on the enemy, but I believe also on his own men. He would sometimes literally run ahead of his troops, shooting with a machine gun on his hip. And he had already received an award for bravery in France, and then another for his heroic acts here in Groningen. And after the war, Dekstraze led the UN peacekeeping force in Congo, and in 1972 he became the chief of staff of the defense staff in Canada. Why do I tell you this resume? Because back in 1940, when Jacques Dekstraze enlisted in the Fusiliers Mont-Royal to fight in distant Europe, he was selling rubber boots and tractor tires. And I think that's not the first thing when you think of a leader of a large organization. When he reported for duty, surely no one thought, well, here's a new general. But sometimes a person grows because of the circumstances and shows courage and shows insight and conviction that sets him apart. And Dekstraze led the way, perhaps to his own surprise, just as soldiers rose to the challenge and liberated homes, villages and towns. People helped because they felt they had to make peace in countries that beforehand they may have struggled to pinpoint on the map. Holland, where exactly is that? Groningen, never heard of. And that was, and it remains, an incredible achievement that people should risk the most precious thing they have, life, to end oppression somewhere far away in another continent. And a lot of the people deliberated in the same way and chose to help others. Only a few, like Jack Extraze, received awards. And sometimes they receive more than one. But in fact, all soldiers, all people who enlist to right wrongs and bring an end to atrocities, all those people are heroes. After all, each of us has only one life to put in the line. And many soldiers, including those of the Canadian forces, lost that life, sometimes during the Allied offensive that brought freedom to Europe, brought freedom to Groningen as well. And those lives, we commemorate them each year in the Netherlands on the 4th of May. And on the next day, the 5th of May, you already expected that of course, we celebrate freedom. And with it, the hope for a better world, which was the basis for many citizens to enlist. Let us hope that, use this hope as an inspiration to join in making this world a better and a more beautiful place. And I hope you have a good time in Groningen and in Westerbork during the rest of your visit. And when you fly back home, I understand it's Friday. I'm sure you're counting the days already. So it's a good trip. I hope you will have new memories that you take with you and tell about home. And perhaps the contact details of my friends, because that's what exchanges are all about, to making new friends, because we are the grassroots that keep a world together. That's our ties, when we are able to touch each other. So either way, there will always be a very special bond between you and us, between our two countries. Thank you again for being here and sharing all that with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Gouverneur. I can call you Gouverneur.
Sure.
Yeah, good. So, in the name of the Black Watch, but also Richemont Maisonneuve, you talk a little bit about Jacques Dextraze. For the information of all of the people here, my first regiment was the Fusiliers Mont-Royal after I was affected to the Black Watch. And yeah, Jacques Dextraze was a sergeant when the war began. And at the end of the war, he was the youngest commanding officer of the battalion, the Fusiliers Mont-Royal, at 25 years old. So after that, he resumed his career and he finished as a Chief of Defense Staff in 1972. So for your hospitality, sir, I want to, with all of the people here, Eric Booth particularly, who organized all of the trip since 4 years, but like you know, because of the COVID, we postponed. We want to offer to you this little souvenir and gift for our trip here in Black Watch.
Thank you very
And
much.
this is also a little coin
Yeah.
that Eric prepared, so for the 75, but now it's +3. And the way that we give the coin in Canada, it's like this.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Okay.
sir. So please go in the center.
It's almost like secret money, like
So this is RSM.
Sir. Okay. Nice to meet you.
Captain Savard for Richemont Maisonneuve and Eric Booth. So you can
Then you have you all here. Yeah.
be in the center for a little picture.
That's the most important part always. The picture.
And you can take this picture.
Almost forgot it.
Do you want them this?
Yeah, this one to the right.
Do you want them actually inside of the circle better?
Can you all see us now? You're today in a more than 400 years old parliamentary building.
Wow.
Thank you very much. So what's next?
That's the question.
questions?
400-year-old president.
So it's working. We are now invited for the detour where you first were, to have a cup of coffee and to have a discussion about this beautiful building, of course.
Except for those involved in the ceremonies. 8 o'clock, up to 8 o'clock is breakfast. 8:30 we depart for the cemetery. We arrive at the cemetery for 9 o'clock to do a ceremony, and it's Colonel Bruce Bolton, Colonel Bruno Plo, Colonel Daniel O'Connor, Colonel Francis Roy, and we will also have our colors, our color party involved. And the bugler. The bugler will be involved. And then we go for Liberation Woods. Now, so Andrew Bennett, Jay Walder, Jason McInnes, and Rod McLeod. Then we depart after that, and we have a free afternoon, but I know the pipe major wants to organize a practice, so when we go out tomorrow evening for our afternoon. Do you know what time you want to? Okay. 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 So for the evening, we are going out to do a performance with the Clan Macbeth Pipe Band, and we were actually in the square where we will be playing. This is a smaller square next to the brand new building. So you have an idea of where we're going to be, and we're just going to march from the hotel up with the other pipe band. And there will be some reenactors with us, as well as some military vehicles. Cool. So that's the plan for tomorrow. 8:30, we're there. So we need to depart at 8:30 on the bus for 8:30, just with what you need for the day. No, only the piper on duty needs to bring their pipes. Thank you. You can go to the hotels now, and the bus drivers will have the coaches open so you can get your luggage out.